Last week we were challenged to talk about the bond market and what Scott Bessent had done, the Treasury Secretary, over the bond market. And the first person that both Abby and I thought of, and by the way, Ab's gone today, so Tommy Fox is with us. Tommy, let him hear your voice there, buddy.
Good morning here on the News and Views Radio Network. Good to be back. It's been quite a while.
That's right. You'll be back. It's good to have you back. You're good at what you do. So, anyway, Abby and I first instantly thought of Riaz Aziz. Now, Riaz is an instructor of economics at Concordia College. He's taught courses in business, economics, management, finance, entrepreneurship. He's also, and we'll get into the foundation that he runs, but Riaz, good to have you back on News and Views. How you been?
Joel, happy to be here. It's been a great summer so far.
Yep, and the kiddos are the young adults are gonna be in that classroom at Concordia College pretty quick.
Concordia kicks in this week, if you will, and I'm already starting to get a boatload of emails from my students eager to know about this and that and everything. So I told them, take it easy. Class is going to start in a couple of days. I'll be right there. So.
Boy, if I could have just had a teacher tell me to take it easy, don't worry. It would have been great. Riaz, the one thing that came at us, and I knew it was going to, was the U.S. and how they're dealing with the $40 trillion in debt. This administration, we've got $40 trillion of debt, almost a third of which has come under his watch, which would make me wonder, or almost 30%, I should say, which would make me wonder if it's even a serious issue anymore, if anybody even looks to debt anymore. And so a couple questions for you. Number one, the bond market, how this played into that. Number two, does it matter when a whole administration says it's no big deal?
Well, here's the thing, Joel. A $40 trillion is a number that I think the average person maybe have a tough time wrapping their arms around. It takes 1,000 billion to make 1 trillion, and we got 40 trillion debt out there. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, that ends up being about $120,000 for every man, woman, and child. That's what we owe. Okay, so what does that mean again? Well, let's put it in context here. Okay, the country with the second highest debt, our competitor happens to be China. China's debt currently happens to be at 20. We are at 40, so we are double than China is. But let's get it down to something that the Americans can really wrap their arms around. Around the 1960s, our debt was about 50%, 53% of our GDP. GDP, gross domestic product, is all the stuff we make and sell in the United States. 20 years later, it was 35%. It jumped, if you will. And then in 2000, it was 57%, excuse me. And in 2026, our debt is 123% of GDP, which means we can't even produce the goods and services that generates our economy to pay the debt off. That's how big, that's how volatile it is right now. And I think the concern that I have, and again, I appreciate being invited to be on your show a number of times, and I think that every time I've been here, I've mentioned to you, because I have a project for my students to do this, which is that the national debt is so severe and it is so large that I think that it could be a crushing blow to the United States if our economy ever took even the slightest dive, if you will. Because how are we going to pay this back? Every 12 months, Joel, our interest rate payment alone on the debt is $1.1 trillion. That's every 12 months. And that's not touching the principal. That's just the interest payment on it, which is why the bond market shock went through all over that we recently saw. Because basically a bond market, again, for your listeners, many of them probably understand this already, but if you don't, a bond market is simply the U.S. Treasury puts out a note that says, we need money, we need you to loan us money to pay up the debt that you already loaned us on that we are not able to pay. That's what a bond market is. So you basically are saying that I have a mortgage payment coming up here this month. How do I pay that? Well, let's see. I wonder if I can borrow the money on my credit card. That's what a bond market is. That's basically
the same thing.
That's basically the same thing. So normally, and it's a tool that many governments use. We're not the only ones. And normally, investors who are looking to engage in the bond market will say, okay, that's not bad. You know, I don't mind lending my country some money because I'm going to get the principal and some interest back. But this time around, investors are saying, oh, wait a minute, you want to borrow more money to pay up more debt. So I am the one taking the risk, meaning I, the investor. Therefore, I want a higher interest on the money that I'm going to loan you, the America, to pay the debt, because I'm taking the risk. So now what happens is that $1.1 trillion that I shared earlier, which is the annual interest payment, that begins to balloon as well. So the cost of borrowing is now gone up because there are so many bonds out there that the investors are basically saying, hey, you guys are the ones who want the money, but I'm not going to loan you or invest, if you will, if I don't get a higher share of it.
Somebody wants to know why we can't renegotiate the interest rate.
That's like saying, why don't we go to the bank and renegotiate the fact that we can't pay our mortgage? Okay, the bank's going to tell you, okay, so let's renegotiate the loan. If the banks were to do that, they'll say, well, maybe you should consider selling your BMW and a Mercedes car that you have. Maybe you should consider getting to a smaller home if possible. Maybe you should pull your kids out of the 7 different athletic programs that you have them signed up to. And maybe you should downsize from 11 streaming programs that you currently have when you don't use most of it anyway. In other words, you have to do some action in order to negotiate. So what are we negotiating? Are we negotiating that you just keep giving us loans so we can keep spending money? Just one example. The fiscal year, which runs from October to September, okay, this 1 year alone, our budget increase is going to be about $309 billion more than last year.
Wow.
So we have an insatiable appetite to spend money that we don't have, and now we are looking to negotiate what? That's like saying, oh, well, I want to buy a bigger house. I just lost my job. I want to go on a vacation. I don't have any income coming in. That's the mode we are in right now, and why would anybody want to negotiate on that level?
So here's the political side of it, and the reason I bring up the political side of it is because through politics is how it's going to get moving to get resolved. There doesn't seem to be anybody fiscally disciplined enough to deal with it, and I'm sorry, in the administration now, they don't seem to care about the $40 trillion. They came out almost right away and said it's not a big issue.
Well, it's kind of like and again, administrations after administrations after administrations have been responsible for this problem. It is not necessarily any one particular administration. But having said that, it also is a reflection on the bosses. The bosses of the people elected to office, from the White House to Congress to Senate, is you and I. And we are just as bad in managing our own budget. Okay, just to give you an example, $1.26 trillion. You want to guess what that number is? That's how much Americans owe on credit card. Credit card between 25 and 35% annual interest rate. We owe $1.26 trillion on credit cards. Okay, we Americans are living on debt. I don't have the exact number, but it's somewhere between the 70 to 73 percentile of the population out there is actually spending more money than they're bringing in, because they take a big chunk of their expenditures and they put it on their credit cards. Okay, so you got your mortgage payment, you got your car payment, you got your whatever, then you got your credit card payment. Okay, so the United States Congress is a reflection of society. We are the bosses, and we have the ability to let those working for us to know that we don't like having this much debt, but we don't choose to do it. And not only that, Joe, we tend to reward them again and again. We get them reelected over and over again. And what's their motivation for doing the right thing?
So where does it go from here? For another question I should ask first: who do we owe the money to?
The first biggest chunk of the money is held by Americans. The second biggest chunk of the money is held by Japan. The third is China. Now, China and Japan, they go back and forth. Who's number one?
But China, you said, is in big debt. I mean, how are they borrowing us money if they're in big debt?
Well, again, we're talking about the Chinese economy as a whole, but the Chinese economy is also growing rapidly. Okay, and that's why they are able to manage their debt, and their debt is half as what we are.
Okay, so how do we pay it off?
Well, we pay it off basically.
Can we get ahead of it? Is my point.
Yes, we can, because there was a time in the 1990s when we actually had a budget surplus. We have a history that isn't going back to 18-something or 17-something. We're talking about 90s, okay, when we actually were able to pay back. If you're going to pay back debt, we do what you and I would do if we had a debt. We reduce our expenditures, okay, And we place a constraint on where we're going to go with this. When you increase a budget from one year to another year by $309 billion, the signal is it doesn't matter. We're just going to keep doing this. And the American people keeps rewarding those that do that. And the question that I have to ask as an economist, because I don't care who's in the White House, who's controlling Congress, it doesn't make any difference because the impact is the same, globally speaking. And I think if I can steal a line from Warren Buffett, he said, we can probably solve the national debt crisis in less than 10 years by passing a law that says anybody who votes to support increasing the national debt cannot run for office again. You just make that a law, okay, applies to all parties, all races, every corner of, all 50 states, right? And we'll get our national debt under control in less than a decade.
And the American people, you feel, will be able to be disciplined enough and get over the fact that they're not going to get everything they want?
Well, that's just it. If you have an American mindset that it's okay, as a developed nation, Joel, we have the least amount of savings of any other developed nations compared to Germans, Canadians, Japanese, and other developed nations. We save the least. We spend an enormous amount of money. Okay, just another example. I was just looking at some information the other day. Americans last year, this really blew me away. $130 billion was spent on gambling.
Really?
Yeah, $130 billion. $1.26 trillion on credit cards. So Congress, in my opinion, again speaking as an economist, is a reflection of society. They are elected by us to represent us, and they're looking at us and says, well, you guys are in debt. You seem to be very comfortable, so I guess I'll reflect. I will, I don't want to sound cynical about it, but as I see members, young men and women, not young men, men and women of the United States Congress and others basically agreeing to increase the debt and then making claims that it's not a problem and so on and so forth, it's like Americans saying, okay, it's fine to put it on my credit card. I guess I'll just find a way to be able to go ahead and manage it. And I'll give you another example. This is a data that came out recently. I'm not sure how validated it is supported, but the average home that Americans live in is anywhere from 3 to 7 times the size that they need for shelter. Okay,
that doesn't surprise me.
3 to 7 times.
That's changed in our lifetime, big time.
Exactly, and there's a difference between need and want. Okay, I mean you're entitled to have as big a house as you want, but when you live in a home that is 3 to 7 times the size that you need, there's a cost to that. We put food in our mouth 2.5 times than what our body needs to survive. Okay, there's a cost to that. And we're apparently comfortable with that. And I'm speaking in large terms. There are obviously a lot of healthy people. There are a lot of people that are obviously watching their pocketbook and not going off on a rash end, if you will. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the majority of the population. And I think Congress is reflective of that.
Riaz, stick around. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we'll close out our conversation with the big question, which is, have we gone past the point of no return? I get the sense from him we haven't. We'll talk more right after this. Riaz Aziz is with us. He is a professor at Concordia College. We're talking about whether or not we're past the point of no return when it comes to the nation's debt. $40 trillion. The president himself said in his first administration, leading into that the magic number was around 23 trillion. And that was the point of no return. After that, we become Greece. Your thoughts on that, Riaz?
Well, I think we can certainly make a return from $40 trillion, Joel, but I think it's going to take a considerable amount of fiscal discipline to be able to do that. I know that's a word that buzzword we throw around all the time, and we repeatedly see it broken over and over again. But one of the reasons why, when you and I were on the break, we talked about the bond market and what's happening with the yields, and that's because investors are looking at the market and saying that they are aggressively nervous. The anxiety factor is higher, if you will. And I think that we can still find ourselves back to where we were. One of the worst things, and I know that some of your listeners will probably disagree with me on this one, and I certainly welcome their comments, is that one of the worst things you can do when you have inflation where we have right now, which, by the way, did take a little dip from June to July, and that's one of the good news on this whole circle, is that when you have a debt of this crisis and you're considering tax cuts, that is possibly the worst possible thing that you could do. I remember some of my students challenging me on that, and I said, well, here's the thing. Think of this. Both income earners just lost their jobs. Okay, mortgage payment is due, car payment is due, school loans are due, and you are refusing to cancel your trip to Hawaii because that was the commitment you made. Okay, and I think that kind of approach is not very healthy for us. And I believe that if Americans have a better understanding as to the huge challenge that we are faced right now with this debt and how it impacts every single thing. And here's the thing, $1.1 trillion on interest payment alone. Forget the principal. We haven't even got to that yet. When you do that, that's less money now for the roads, the bridges, the clean air, military service, and all of that. Our military expenses are already coming down to $1 trillion. So I think that if we have a fiscal discipline, we might be able to do this a lot better.
20 seconds, tell people about your foundation.
Thank you very much. I run a foundation that helps young women, underprivileged women in India, to be able to go to college, and we raise money. The foundation is called Begunahi, Begunahi. You can find it on Google, and we're helping them a lot. In fact, I have one right now that's ready to go to Italy to start her law college.
Really?
Absolutely.
Way to go. All right. Thank you so much. Always good to talk to you. Ride safe, by the way, if you stretch out that Harley.
So do.